Recording in progress.
Good evening and welcome to the September 4th Ways and Means Committee meeting. Kelly, for the last time while you're working for Brentwood, could you please call the roll?
Chairwoman Tice.
Here.
Alderwoman Goode.
Here.
Alderman Gould.
Here.
Alderman Erger.
Here.
All members are
Right. Are there any changes or adjustments to the agenda? Seeing none, it will be so approved. Citizen comments. I see people out, but who aren't citizens. Is there anybody online, Kelly?
no, ma'am.
Okay, great. Then we'll move on to report of committee chair and alder folks. I have no report. Alderwoman Goode,
No report.
Alderman Gould,
No report.
and Alderman Erger.
No report.
Doesn't look like we have a city administrator report, so we'll move on to the investment report.
I'm going to field that one because Brad is unavailable this evening.
Okay.
So, and it's pretty elementary. He has provided his report. The interest earned for 2025 is listed at about $497,000. Only $308,000 of that is shared among our operating funds. $175,000 of that has been earned in the general fund. And then it talks about what was earned in 2024 and those earnings. And then it also further talks about earnings overall from the time that Brad took over the investments. And then on page 2, he has provided a chart. Are there any questions? All right. I like it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to financial statements, which I think is still you, Michelle.
So in your packets, you have the July financial statements, you have the revenue analysis and the expenditure analysis. Are there any immediate questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I have one that I've asked you before, and I brought up last month about the sales tax revenue, and it seems down in sort of 4% in Fund 40, 50, and the ETSD, and it's 9% in general, which I know has the TIF, but could you just comment on that
Yes, I will.
publicly?
Yes,
Thank
and then
you.
I also did run August, just so that way I could sort of help to sort of ease some of the concerns and just sort of make sure that I was understanding where we were at, because I know that they are down, and I'm not overly alarmed at the moment. I mean, we are watching them, we're watching the trends. I will say that in the general fund, that the use tax is up. I believe in July it's up 1%. The use tax in August is up 4%. So the use, it sort of gives the indicator, though, that if they're not shopping in the stores, they're potentially having items delivered. So the use tax is sort of falling on the higher end of the trend. And then the 3% to 4%, they are still running lower in the other funds. It's 3% in August, even for the capital and the other funds, but it's really running dollar-wise at $60,000 to $100,000. So the threshold of dollars I don't think are overly concerning when I look at those trends still at the moment. The other thing to be noted is that if it's posted in July, it's actually June spending, and the trends for summer seem to be a little lower than once we start to hit the holiday season. So they are things that we are watching, but I'm not overly alarmed at the moment. So hopefully that's helpful.
Other questions for Michelle? Did you have other things you wanted to talk about in your revenue analysis or the
Once
variance
again, I think
analysis?
that for July, I think things were holding pretty steady. There's no real high expenditures that I'm overly worried about. The revenues are maintaining. I think for the most part, we've met our thresholds and met our goals. So once again, to get through almost 7 months of the year, I feel that we're just holding pretty steady and no major adjustments at the moment.
Yeah, I'll just add too on sales tax. I know consumer spending is down a little bit this year, so that may or may not be correlated with that. Yeah.
And I do know in my finance officers group and association, those surrounding areas are having sort of the same results. They have all indicated that their June, July, and August numbers are hovering around 3% down in their sales tax. So once again, I think economic factors and other things. But our use tax, like I said, is sort of picking up that difference, and we're lucky for that.
Great, well, moving on, doesn't look like we have anything on the consent agenda or under old business, so we will cruise right along to new business. First, we have an employee handbook update about police recruitment, and it's Tangela.
Good afternoon. So for the police recruitment policy, when we review the current handbook, There was little differences between what police receive and what fires receive. Chief Speaks has come to us and asked to have an update where the police recruit in the academy would receive 100% compensation during their time in the academy versus 75% compensation. In addition to that, a police recruit cannot participate in the police and fire pension fund with the contributions of the 6% or what the city contributes to that fund for them. And they ask us that that be updated so they can contribute in that pension fund as well while they're in the academy.
Questions for Tangela or Chief?
So this is to be consistent with what is in for the fire department? Is that what
Correct.
We're saying? And then are other departments, other police departments, municipal comparators, are they also matching this?
Transparently, this did come up very quickly. I have not had the chance to research that. We did try to dive deep and see what sparked it at 75% when the city brought it on
Yeah.
board. I've not been able to
You're not
find
going
anything.
to find that, yeah.
You
I mean,
know,
I generally, go ahead, Paula.
I'd like to venture, and because Chief Cottrell is here and he could correct me if what I'm saying is wrong. I think the distinction between both is when we send someone through the fire academy, they're already paramedics. Is that correct? So at least they can ride the ambulance, for instance. So the difference between that and police is we can't put them on the street. That
Okay.
there's no way.
So-
So I think that was the rationale for the 75% versus the 100%.
So typically, how long are they, if we hire a recruit from the academy, how long are they on staff until they graduate from the academy? And, I mean, is there,
Chief Speaks?
okay, 6 month, about a 6 month period? Okay. And in that 6 months that they're in the academy, we can't put them on patrol or on the street?
No, that's
What-
correct.
What are their, other
Is that
than
correct?
being in the academy, is there a role that they
No.
have with the city?
No.
Okay, so it's just locking them down to
Yes,
be,
yes. Guaranteeing that hopefully,
Yep.
that when they graduate, they're going to want to come work for the city. And if at the end of that, they choose not to, then they owe us 100% of that back.
okay.
Alderwoman Goode?
I think, in transparency, I think the academy and trained police officers are highly valuable and they contribute at a higher level than a recruit and should be compensated at a higher level than a recruit. So while paying a recruit is a great investment into the future, someone who is just a trainee and someone who has successfully completed trainee, I have a hard time saying they should be compensated at the same level. I think a person who has completed training, has shown success, and is a full member, our staff should be compensated at a higher rate. So I've not seen a reason to compensate a lesser trained person at the same. There should be some reward and some acknowledgement of their additional value.
Thank you.
So I guess I have two questions. First, are the fire recruits who are already paramedics, are they working for us and are they on the truck? So they are here. I see, since he's not at the podium, I will say that Chief Cottrell is nodding his head that the fire recruits do that. And then I guess my other question is, are there, which it sounds like you didn't have time to research, if there are other cities, like if every other city is doing this, then that may be standard that we need to do to recruit police officers. So I guess if you could find that out for us, I think that would be really helpful for us to make a good decision.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the September cash resources review. Michelle.
Hi. In your packet, there is a memo outlining the request for funds to liquidate some investments in order to make the bond payment that's due October 1st. We have about a $4 million payment. We had about $2 million in cash. And so I am requesting if we can liquidate some investments from 2027 and keep 2026 whole. We are still pending payments from FEMA SEMA of $1.7 million and a TDD of $1.1 million. So sort of waiting on that cash and that holdup sort of has caused this circumstance at the moment. And I did speak with Brad that when we get these influxes of cash, if we can sort of start to stack our September to have more maturities, so the cash, now that we know that this, I'm 2 years into this and understand it a little better. Now that I know that this is when such a big payment is due, we'll make sure that the investments come due on time and that this request hopefully isn't annually. But at the moment, we are pending these other payments, and so the request is to liquidate some investments from 2027 to make the payments.
Questions about this?
I mean, in general, I think it's a great idea to use the investment income to pay down debt, so, and, so I think it's a good plan.
Comments? So is there a motion to?
I'll make a motion to approve staff's recommendation to liquidate 2.2 million investments to invest, or to assist with principal debt service payments.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is proposed amendments to the vehicle replacement policy. Dan, this is a big one.
Has quite a few different files attached to it. So tried to summarize the main changes in the memo. So if you recall, we have a policy. The first policy is, I think, around 2012 or 13. We did revise it in 2020. That was the resolution 1060. And a lot's changed in the past 5 years. So we're trying to improve upon what we have for our vehicle replacement policy and put it in line with some of the new things that we've acquired. So, for instance, we didn't have a UTV, we didn't have a K9 truck. My pavement roller that we have, that wasn't in the table. There's a table at the very back, it's the last page, so it lists a vehicle category, a life cycle, and then its mileage, evaluation score, hours. Some things don't have an hour meter, that would be like our pavement roller. Some of the older ones didn't have it. I think our new one might have it. I don't believe that it does, though. Our street sweeper, of course, has an odometer and hour meter, but the street sweeper in the old table was 15 years. The industry standard's about 10 or 12 years, so I put that as 10 years as its life cycle. And these are more or less guidelines, that last table. If you're interested in trying to get something replaced, it needs to meet one of those criterion first. So it's like for the patrol K9 truck, it's either going to be at 7 years or 75,000 miles. It doesn't mean you replace it. That's where we've outlined the steps. If you look at the clean version, page 6, towards the bottom, it outlines the steps in the new replacement process for vehicles and equipment. So when you look at the criterion, if it's one or the other, okay, you've checked one of the boxes. Now you need to contact us at Public Works, and then we do the detailed evaluation. In the case of vehicles, we send that out to Kirkwood for an impartial party to take a look at it. They score it. If you look at the new evaluation forms that are part of this red line and clean version, we've separated it. It used to be like a one box fits all. It's no longer that way. So police and fire have their own point range. And instead of like good or very good, we've actually put an action item in there. So it's either you retain it, you review it against the ERR, which we'll be talking about later, or you replace it. And just because it says replace doesn't mean that it's necessarily replaced at that time. It's just a request to replace it. Because if you look at your steps, you still need to bring that recommendation, bring the detailed evaluation with its points to the Director of Finance and the City Administrator. They're going to look at the ERR and the overall budget and figure out, does it fit? If it's before its time, then probably not. If it's past its time, it still has to be budget allows you to do such a thing. Some of the other things that I highlighted on the memo that changed, besides what we just talked about, there's an added detailed explanation for like police and fire. Before, it only talked about the patrol vehicles and why you replace those with the frequency that you do. We included, the other vehicles that PD uses, as well as the fire chief and assistant chief. So that's been added in there. The ERR is brand new, so it talks about that. That's the equipment replacement reserve, the model that we'll be discussing. Didn't know if you had questions on it. The other thing that I know we included in here was sustainability. So that I know was mentioned on page 6. So there's language supporting transitioning the fleet to electric alternatives, as well as alternative fuels when electricity is not a possibility. Or if there's new technology, hydrogen fuel cells or something like that. And I know, like I said, the table distinguishes between like internal combustion versus hybrid/electric. Those are new categories as well. So I know there's a lot of moving parts here compared to the other one. I don't know if you have specific questions related to a certain page, certain paragraph, we can go through.
Would you like to start? You want me to start? Go ahead, Alderman Gould.
I'll start. Thank you very much. One, I appreciate the point system and the rigor that's gone into that, because I think that is important, that as we start to evaluate, that we don't just say, okay, well, it's reached a certain mileage or it's reached a certain year, then, let's flip it. And so I think that's very good that you've done that. My biggest question is, I thought when we were talking about vehicle replacement, one of the bigger concerns that I had was I felt like we were getting rid of vehicles rather quickly, and that there were vehicles that probably could have a little bit more life on them. And I'm not seeing that in this chart that is on page 13, for the vehicle equipment threshold, it seems like we haven't really increased that much. And, when I just did a search and look at other vehicle replacement policies, for example, Philadelphia has, for patrol cars, it's 5 years, and unmarked, it's 8 years. And, other cities seem to have a little, and none of the cities that I found from a mileage standpoint were anything less than 100,000 miles. So I guess I'm, in theory, I like generally the policy and the rigor, but I'm questioning the life cycle that we are putting here, because I feel like we're starting out probably a lot lower than it needs to be on a lot of these vehicles. So I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I looked at other cities as well, and I know Philadelphia was one that came up. I know I looked at one in San Luis Obispo, California, and a couple other ones. And it just depends on what the vehicles are used for, if it's patrol versus non-marked, things like that. The truck, I think, is probably where it needs to be, 70 or 75,000, because it's my understanding that the canine unit, that the dog would be expected to be used around a 7-year period. So I thought, well, that probably makes sense, so that whenever you determine whether you're keeping the whole program, you
Sure.
could decide whether you're keeping the truck, you could reassign it. I know, to your point, some vehicles have been reassigned. So I know police, one of their Explorers was reassigned. It wasn't just removed from the fleet. It was reevaluated, and then it was used, or still is in use, by the fire marshal. So just because it's met these initial thresholds doesn't mean that we get rid of it right away. It goes through this whole rigorous, review, and then if there is a need for another department or something like that, or say that the budget doesn't align such that you get anything that year, well, then one of the ones you were going to get rid of, you just retain and figure out how to fit it in there. As far as the trucks and that, those didn't change hardly any. 10 years is about what you should try to get out of a big truck. We have several that are more than 10, and we continue to use them. The difficulty with running them past a certain threshold would be getting parts on the open market. We have one that's a 2008.
Yeah.
So a 17-year-old truck, I have to buy parts on eBay. I can't call Al's or O'Reilly's or whoever.
Right.
That's the difficulty with that. police vehicles, I know that their hours are high, their mileage may or may not be high. I know in the case with that Explorer, it was like 133,000 miles and over 4,800 hours, which is a lot. I have a truck 68 that's a plow truck, and its hours are high, but its mileage is low. It's because we're 2 square miles, it's used primarily as a plow truck, but its points bring it to that range where it should be considered for replacement.
Yeah, and I think that's the other point that I have, is that we're only 2.5 square miles.
Yeah.
So it seems like, and if there are policies that are in place that are contributing, especially police patrol policies or something like that, that are contributing to higher mileage that doesn't quite, lead to, yes, better patrolling, maybe we need to discuss that, but, because I think, having a small city like we have, to be able to have to go through the life cycle of these cars this fast seems pretty excessive to me. And I'd love to see even the threshold be raised just a little bit, especially when we look into EVs. We've talked about it before that, we really should be, the value of having an EV, the selling point of having an EV is that the maintenance cost is less, you don't have as many parts to break, and that you can keep them longer. We shouldn't have a minimum here of 75,000 miles on an EV or 100,000 miles on an EV. It should be able to go longer, in my opinion, especially as it relates to if it truly is, it's a cost savings and all that, that's great, but if it's also about an environmental impact, it does take a little longer for the greenhouse gas from production to sort of equal out. And so the longer we keep it, the better, even better it is on everything. So I would like to see some of these minimums be maybe increased a little bit if we can.
So if I may interject, I've heard Michelle, because we've had multiple meetings preparing for this one tonight, she's used the term fluid. And so for EV, since they're very new, we're starting off with this initial recommendation for the policy because no one has really had them for a long time. So we really know how much they last. So we have 1 year under our belt. We come back next year. And we're going to, and Dan and all of us are going to take a look at this policy every year and see whether there's a need to, and we expect to hear from you all too, whether, you want us to take another look, which we will, and make changes to that. So that's why we are starting off with what we are proposing for EV. But what we haven't shared with you this year, and we're happy to share it if you wanted to see it, is the evaluation that's done on the vehicles. So sometimes it's a combination of all these factors. So it might meet the numbers that says, okay, replace it, but then you look at the analysis that was done by the mechanics,
Right.
and you look at the repair cost and how often it's been down. So it's a
Yeah,
combination
you don't
of
want to
that.
get rid of a good car.
Exactly. So oftentimes we
And then-
sit in and say, no, let's push this off.
That's good point.
This can last a little longer. So those were some of the rationale we've used in coming up with the proposal, but we're happy to take another look, a critical eye, at the Philadelphia policy and see, and talk
some
to
of
the
the others,
departments.
that was just one of them as an
And-
example,
Oh, Eric, you want to say something?
One thing I want to make sure, as we looked at this, is that threshold. That doesn't mean that that's when the vehicle gets placed.
Yeah.
That threshold is
When you start
is when
to-
it starts evaluating the car, and then that's when the point system
Understood.
comes on point.
Yep.
I will tell you that if you talk to a lot of the department heads, I think they would say that they're driving some of their vehicles on the last legs. Our Magic Bus had a transmission replaced this past year. It barely qualified for the point threshold. So, I mean, I think we are doing critical analysis of
That's good to know.
how long we use these vehicles. And I think when we did the little tweak for police and fires, making sure that their vehicles are consistent, are ready, are there, and not sitting in a shop when they should be out patrolling and things like that. So we wanted to make sure that the public safety vehicles especially were reliable for the residents in those emergency situations. The rest of us, we'll drive them until they fall apart.
So kind of along, I'm going to jump in now because it's along that line. So I guess I sort of question, there's a phrase early on that said, because each municipality has unique fleet usage patterns, no single guide can apply universally, which makes sense, but I really think we need to make sure that not just on the cars, but on all the vehicles, from the fire truck and the sanitation truck to the rollers, all those things, that we're comparing what similar municipalities and cities do. So it seems like we've sort of kept what we had before, and it doesn't seem as changed. And the other piece of that is there's some cars, like the police cars and the sanitation truck, that drive and idle. And then there are command vehicles that get driven on highway miles back and forth for commuting purposes. And those are different kind of mile. Like,
Right.
it's a lot easier on a car to drive on the highway than it is to just sit and overheat driving around town. So that just is,
I know the mechanic's able to pull all the hours on the newer fleet that police has. So a Tahoe, you can look at the odometer reading, but he's also looking at the hour reading too, because some of them, the hours are way higher than, say, the odometer reading. So he's using the worst of the scores,
Okay.
To calculate the probability it's going to fail.
Right.
Because again, this is more of a risk assessment. So it's like, I know with the planning folks, their cars are 2015, 2016. So for a sedan, it's more than met the 7 years. They're 10 years old. But when we do the evaluation, the point range does not get you anywhere in that review ERR. It's retained now. And it was retained before. I think we've scored them at least 2 years
Yeah,
running,
we
maybe
have.
even
And you
3.
look at the repair cost, it's next to minimum.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Right.
obviously, it's an automatic, we're going to defer
Right.
and keep this for a little while.
And one more thing I forgot to mention, and I apologize, that I keep butting into Dan's presentation, is the threshold is important as well for the ERR, is that we make sure if we put that 7 years, by year 7, we have the funding ready for it. And so if we go past it, the funding is still there. But we wanted to make sure that we had that ERR in place for those thresholds to make sure, worst case scenario, we already funded that vehicle if it comes up.
Great point, thank you, yeah. Alderwoman Goode.
Thank you. So I like that the policy does break out fire and police from everything else. Like, I think that's a very, very nice addition. And it looks like the old policy was approved in 2019. And I know there's been a lot of advances in cars and transportation vehicles in even 6 years. So I would think I like the improvements on a lot of things. Could we level up again? Probably do some more comps, but would it be possible to maybe think about this as a policy that's like a 5-year policy and then it gets revisited in a very systematic way on the point system as technology continues to evolve, as we get more? Do we need to have another bucket for EV vehicles in the same way we have police and fire vehicles now?
Long time. What also dictates what we buy is what's on the market. And the example was shared with us by the PD that, was it the Durango that you all had, and we couldn't find it on the market, and then we went to something else. So, which is why we're comfortable looking at it every year, because market can change drastically. But if you say 5,
I mean, I'm very, very comfortable if we do it every year, but I would want to do it at least every
every
5. Yeah.
wholesale change to it every 5 years.
Yes,
Okay.
and a review, just to build that in.
We
'cause I
include
think
that in the policy language.
And I'm open to different timeframes, but I just think there is some significant changes that we might need to wholeheartedly.
So you're saying
Reevaluate.
review the policy every 5 years, not review, like they're reviewing every vehicle and all the
Yes, but
equipment
we-
every year, but
And we can
review the
review
policy globally every
Yeah,
5
and we
years.
can review sooner if you're noticing trends or have recommendations, but I think the policy itself, there's enough change in vehicles and lifespans and components and just manufacturing that it's worth saying the policy as a whole needs to be comprehensively reviewed in a set time frame.
Yeah, and for the electric and hybrid, I put 7 years. I thought maybe putting 8. I didn't want to go 10 or more because typically your warranty is only for a 10-year lifespan on a battery. Not that it can't last more than 10, but I know I'm getting into that whole probability game that if I push an EV to 15 years and the battery goes out, it's way worse than a transmission or something with internal combustion. I can live with a compressor, condenser, any of those things failing. you know, the battery pack or an electric motor. I know the electric motors will go hundreds of thousands of miles. I'm worried about lithium ion batteries, and then suddenly that technology is obsolete, and then somebody else's battery is better, solid state, and I'm stuck with this thing for 10 years. And again, this is, as Eric mentioned, you know, this is the first step at looking at it. If you haven't met any of the criterion, then, you know, you wouldn't move forward. But this was just to get your foot in the door. But I can look at extending those. For the patrol vehicles, I left it the same as what was in the original policy. I didn't change those. So if there's a direction, if you wanted to go 4 years or 100,000 miles, I mean, I can update this. Or if you want us to look at the other comparators, which we did do, I can put the comparator next to it and see if there's a better number.
I mean, it seems like looking at rather than just randomly moving it to 100,000 miles,
Yeah.
it might be worth looking at the comparators, and then if you have reasons that you think that your reasons that you think the comparators are wrong, or you think it's important, as Eric said, to save the money sooner, but doesn't necessarily mean we'll replace the vehicle, then we might want to tweak it that way.
We'll
Yeah, and I
bring
knew
it back.
police already reached out to Webster Groves, like for their EV, but they don't have a definitive threshold. You know, it's not like they're going to say 8 years, 100,000 miles on a Mach-E. They haven't had enough use of the vehicle to really determine, you know, drill down onto those numbers.
Yes, Alderman Berger.
Just to confirm, do we sell these on a secondary market once we get rid of them? I think another thing too we need to be taking into account, and maybe you already are, is maximizing the value that we can get on that secondary value. So, you know, if selling at 75,000 is going to get us more than 100,000, 125,000, you know, let's take that into account. I'd be interested to see an analysis on maybe some of the vehicles that we have currently, you know, what that looks like at 75, 100, 125, et cetera.
I knew the full EVs. I did a deep dive on that, and the resale is terrible on certain makes and models. That after 3 years, you've lost 50% of its value. So if you bought it for 60, 30's not out of reason for selling it 3 years from now. Versus a $60,000 Tahoe is probably still in the 40s, you know, with low miles.
Yeah, I just know the closer you get to 100 and going over 100, the value really starts to drop right there. So something to be mindful of.
Alderman Goode.
So I definitely appreciate the idea of like maximizing our return on cash out. I also am very open to the idea that we've already taken that initial depreciation hit, so why consider the trade-offs in like a newer car. We're going to start taking huge depreciation hits on the first 50,000 miles when we have a vehicle, if it meets the standards, if it meets the needs and the scoring points. Yeah, we can't sell it for as much, but would we lose $10,000 in value on a new car? It might be worth keeping that existing car for one more year at a lower price, would be the only thought I might have. And I think, to your point, an analysis could show that trade-off. But
Yeah.
if we can keep something for an extra year and not have a huge depreciation hit, that's always a nice plus too.
Yeah, I agree. It's a tricky game of trying to time the best time to sell these things, because you hold on too long and then all of a sudden you got a lot of repairs that you have to address, and the value of the car, you know, drops quickly. So all relative. Yeah.
One more question. You mentioned warranties, and I know that part of the reason we want to do this is also the fear of mechanical failures that would, you know, it's going to unexpected costs that like the bus, the magic bus. Do municipalities have access to extended warranties or anything like that, policies that would maybe help offset or at least secure that, okay, yes, it might cost us X amount of money, but we know over the course, we're not going to be hit with a, you know, $30,000
I've
replacement,
never
engine
explored it, but
replacement or
I mean,
whatever.
I guess we could. It'd be like a car shield or somebody like that. I mean,
I've never explored it either.
I mean, it might be something interesting to look at, especially if we start to look at certain equipment or certain vehicles and say, okay, we think we probably could get more out of this, but the risk is they may come with an unexpected hit. So then you look at, again, maybe part of the analysis is if there were extended warranties that were available to the market for fleets, for municipal fleets, that might give us some certainty that if something did happen, okay, well, we're covered under the extended warranty. Just something to consider.
Yeah, I knew the regular manufacturer's warranties that you or I get as regular consumers doesn't apply to these fleet, at least for the dump trucks. You know, I can't get
Right.
7 years, 100,000 miles. It's,
No,
it's
I
like 1
realize that.
year
That's
bumper to
where
bumper,
it's-
and that's it.
That's where it's applicable,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, because we've had some major failures on some of the police vehicles, the Durangos in particular, would be a condenser, compressor, you know, radiator, and then you call up Dodge and it's like, nope, it's not covered, you know, because it's 2.5 years old.
Right.
So,
So
I'll
maybe,
ask,
maybe
yeah.
something of value for some of that, you know, to ease some of the tension of what if.
yeah, it's worth at least exploring to see what that cost would be. I know that there's, you know, warranties for your home for, you know, HVAC or electrical, plumbing. You can do those home warranties and take
And
some
sometimes they're
instead.
not worth it, but
Right.
and other times they become good insurance policies to have. So, okay.
Okay, so a lot of work's gone into this, and now there's homework for
Yes.
until
Yeah,
the
just
next
bring it back to
meeting.
the next meeting.
Good,
Okay,
thank you.
thanks.
Thanks for the work. Okay, moving on, discussion regarding Resolution 980, the vehicle commuting policy.
So I'm going to take that. So, you know, we looked at the Resolution 980 vehicle commuting policy as we had these extensive discussion about the vehicle replacement policy and realized quickly that it was out of date because there are positions on here no longer in existence in the city, or there are positions that no longer have a take-home car. And so our focus initially was on just amending that policy to bring it back into compliance with what we have. But the more discussion I've had with the committee, members of the committee, and with our Labor Council particularly this afternoon, is instead of, so we're changing positions, instead of going forward with the recommendations that are in here, we really just want to hear from you on what distinction you think needs to be in the policy, and then we can just rewrite it as new. Because exemptions are made in here about personal use versus business use, on how some of these vehicles can be used. And we reference IRS publication 15B. So put all of that aside and let's hear what you feel it needs to look like, and then we can go from there.
Alderwoman Goode.
I'll kick off. So, while I think business travel anywhere in the continental United States is no problem, so if there's a training event for police or fire in Chicago, completely acceptable, can be in Florida, wherever. Driving a police vehicle with a group of people to a work event is completely acceptable. There is, I believe, on category 3, and it shows up again, there's the idea of 100 miles and within bordering states. The far side of Kansas is pretty far away and this is for personal use. I just think taking a city vehicle that would have a city logo for personal use that far away it's too far. If it's nothing wrong with taking a vehicle for personal use to hit a quick trip, grab a hot dog, to go grab some coffee, hit up Walmart, like completely fine on someone's lunch break. No need to switch out cars on a lunch break, but 100 miles and all bordering states is pretty far for personal use. And I think there's some optics with should that car show up on a golf course or something like that. Would just be bad optics for the city.
Other comments?
The only other comment I had was the removal of certain employee job titles that are listed, which I understand while maybe they don't currently exist or don't currently have a take-home vehicle, but as a general policy, you know, should it transcend, you know, who's currently on staff, And is it appropriate for, you know, if there were an assistant police chief or you know, superintendent of streets or whatever, maybe we have somebody that is that in the future. And should it be in the policy just in case, so we don't have to change the policy later because somebody added, or if, I hope you never leave, but, you know, if we have another city administrator at some point that does want a vehicle.
A vehicle. Well, I mean, I had a
you know.
vehicle at
No,
some
I know you
point.
did. That's why I'm saying, like, you know,
But I think the provisions for how I use it, what I use it for is in my contract.
right.
And so the next city administrator hopefully would have
Would-
that.
would do that. Okay,
And,
yeah.
you know, the chief of police also has a contract. So his use and that is in
So
his contract.
as personnel changes, it
Right.
wouldn't affect the policy.
No.
And I guess that's what I'm getting at. I
Right.
just want to make sure that we're
And we can make those
future-proofing-
changes rather
Yeah, sure.
easily, you know.
Future-proofing policy so that we're not having to change it every time
Right.
roles change, you know,
Right.
that's all. As long as that's fine.
I just wouldn't want to add old positions that used to get cars, and if we hire someone in that job that,
Right.
you know, 15 years ago, they had a car, but now it's not a job we think should have a car, I wouldn't want that position
No,
listed
it's-
in the policy.
that's
that-
true.
yeah.
And some of what guides this is after the state audit of the city, the Ways and Means Committee, Public Works and the board was sensitive to what they heard in that report, so that guided what you see in this language. There are positions that had car allowance,
Right.
and, you know, they barely drove anywhere. So those changes were made because of that, but I think we're flexible enough. We don't change policies that often, but flexible enough to bring it back to you when need arises.
And then like the DEA, I mean, I know that we don't participate in it now, but.
Right, and it could come back.
But we may in the future.
Sure, sure.
So is it good to keep it in the policy just in case, or do we just
So
remove
we'll
it?
keep an eye to that as
Yeah.
we rewrite this, and maybe leave that in there. But keep in mind the general tone of what we're hearing today about greater restriction on
On
personal
personal
use.
use, yeah. Okay, thank
Like there's agreement there. Any other comments on this? Okay. Then the last one is the Jarvis masterpiece, the equipment replacement reserve model. So
Oh, how
I
exciting.
don't see Gina online, so I
I know,
get,
she-
which, good for her.
Volleyball game.
But
She's not
Michelle,
online tonight, but it is absolutely her brainchild, and I am glad to have it. There's a long memo in here and several attachments. Just to give a little bit of history, in the budget book, on page 26, there is an assigned fund balance number called Equipment Replacement Reserve, which essentially means you have been saving dollars to purchase equipment and you weren't using them. So, upon my arrival, I sort of dove a little farther into this. Gina was the director of finance years ago, probably 2012, 13, 14, and she created this idea of putting replacement dollars to buy future equipment, and created such a model. And then I think in her departure, the model stopped, but the saving of the dollars did not. So we sort of decided to bring it back to life. We have spent the last year identifying what items should be associated with those dollars particularly. And then we spent this last budget session making sure that it made sense, meeting with the department heads and working in conjunction with the policy that Dan just represented, using useful life, using replacement cost, using purchase cost, and then figuring out the amount of dollars needed to save to replace those items based upon useful life. And that's sort of what this represents. What is not in we're going to call it the ERR to keep it short. What's not in there is furniture, fixtures, air conditioners, those types of things. What is in there are the vehicles, machinery, Zambonis, side-by-sides, and any individual item like that that's $5,000 or more. The patrol bikes for the police department are not in there. Individually, they're less than $5,000. The turnout gear for the fire department is not in there. The coats and pants separately do not reach $5,000. So those items will be purchased with the capital dollars that we get. So this is the review and a request to sort of implement the ERR, use those dollars, and then when we present the capital budget, the intent is to have a capital request, an ERR request. The ERR request will match the ERR schedule that we have. There is a scheduled replacement date associated with each item. As Dan sort of indicated, based on the policy, it is a recommendation. We have spent the last couple weeks looking at those items, reviewing the analysis that's happened from the mechanics, if that was necessary, looking at replacement cost, and then following back and tweaking the ERR as that became necessary, hence making it fluid. It is a very fluid document. So if we sell an item that is on there, such as a patrol vehicle or something else, it comes off of that. And when we purchase one, it goes on and we start saving those dollars as such. And the new capital request, there will be a line item as if it's expense for dollars to fund the ERR. So we will continue with the funding of it and we'll continue with the spending of it to make sure that this program is sustainable. So that is in a nutshell, sort of what we have done. We've brought all the assets back in-house, and now we are requesting to spend those dollars that you have been assigning to a program that didn't potentially exist. And so in there are tabs per department, which is sort of how we shared it with them. They have verified every item on there. They have verified the useful lives. They have verified the replacement cost. And then as each year comes due, we do an analysis of that. And then if it's not due to be replaced, we'll move it on to another year, having already saved those dollars. But the review of that item does happen right at budget time.
So I want to start. This is an incredible project that your office and all the departments have been helping you do, and I know it's taken well over a year to even get it close to this, and it's really a remarkable document, and it's a very responsible way to track our assets and keep track of the money that we need, and so kudos for putting this together and making sure that we are saving to replace these critical vehicles that are, and other equipment that our employees need, so thank you. So I do have a question about this. So with the amount that we're saving for all this equipment, and then we're gonna have to put money in from assuming the money will come from capital that will
That's
go in
correct.
every year.
These are straight capital funding. So the capital dollars, the almost 3.2 million that you get, yes, probably each year for the next 3 to 5 years, it needs about 850,000 of that to fund the replacement of the items.
So then there's remaining money in capital for
Yes.
new equipment, streets,
Yes,
sidewalks,
the capital,
other
but
capital
the capital
investments.
budget is balanced and will be balanced. And like I said, it will have a line on there that says the funding for the equipment replacement program, and then a tab for the equipment replacement program will show what that assigned fund balance should be, and its rolling numbers as well, and its spending patterns. In '26, it will be slightly alarming because we have some large spending due to the purchase of the fire truck and the ambulance. Those will be some big spend dollars, but we'll start saving for those again. You have been saving for those types of purchases all along. So, but you will see the savings of those dollars in the operating budget, and we are making sure that that stays balanced first.
Right. Okay, other questions?
I guess the question I have is I mean, it's a lot to go through, but
It is.
as you've broken out each equipment, for example, if somebody says, you know what, let's defer this a little bit longer, I just want to make sure that even in the fund, that money then doesn't get gobbled up by somebody else, so it stays with that line item.
It stays with that line item, correct.
Okay.
It stays with that line item, yes.
And then presumably you'll need to evaluate as maybe the equipment costs rise or something like that.
Sort of
The
what
money
we've-
that's there or projected to be there, you may have to
Yes,
adjust.
that money is assigned to that particular item. And what the model says is that you no longer need to save dollars for it into the following year.
Right.
Because we did it for the useful life, say we did a useful life of 8 years, but we actually kept it for 10.
Got it.
Yeah, so that line item is associated with the savings for that particular item only. So,
Perfect. Yeah, wonderful, thank you. This is amazing.
Yes.
Kind of makes my
I know.
eyes cross a little, but
It's a lot, but for the nerd in me, it makes me really happy. So, and it does reconcile. It reconciles to our audit. So we reconcile to the assets in the audit. We've reconciled this in multiple places, as well as what we took out for furniture and fixtures. And there are line items in the regular operating capital budget to sort of help address those as those needs arise. So.
Any other questions or comments?
I appreciate the due. no, sorry.
Oh, yeah,
I
go ahead.
appreciate the due diligence to say, here's when we're going to need cash, and being diligent in setting aside money to an actual line item and not creating a general pool. So I appreciate the detail across line items and to unique items.
Thank you. So what we won't necessarily show the details of the ERR. It actually is in here. You have each tab that sort of says each department said we own this. This is how we've identified useful life and the dollars we're saving. When we move into the capital, once again, you'll see just two separate spreadsheets, but every item on that ERR per year, it now reconciles to that replacement tab. So if we move them, we'll move them on the replacement tab, so everything will reconcile. But that's what's sort of functioning in the background, and dictating the dollars to be saved.
Right. So this is just sort of operating in the background, so this
Yes.
isn't something we need to
Yes.
approve.
Yes,
This is
and
just-
I guess it would be probably appropriate to get a vote to sort of reinstate the program. I mean, once again, you do have an assigned fund balance for the dollars. I am requesting to start functionally using those dollars.
Okay, is there a motion to begin using the equipment replacement reserve system again? All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next is citizen comment. Is anyone online, Kelly?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and then with that, seeing no further